All right, so let's wrap up this last session with learning myths. So, learning myths are actually very interesting because these are kind of misconceptions that we hear colloquially all the time. Maybe we might see it on a TV show, maybe we might see it in conversations with other people, or sometimes we might even hear it in our own educational context. And so I wanted to break down some of these learning myths to see what's a myth and what's the truth, what's a misconception and what is real. So one of the first things is muscle memory. I think we've all heard about this in terms of if you've played sports or maybe you work out regularly, but the myth here is that your muscles remember things it has done before. The learning myth of muscle memory is this belief that our muscles have the ability to remember and perform tasks automatically without conscious thought or effort. It implies that through repetitive practice, movements, or skills, we become ingrained in our muscles for how to conduct specific kinds of actions or skills, and we can execute them flawlessly without needing to actively think about them. But in reality, the term muscle memory is inaccurate. It's actually a myth. Our muscles do not possess the ability to remember and learn independently. Instead, the term refers to the phenomenon of procedural memory or our motor skills and learning, which involves the brain and the nervous system rather than the muscle having memories within themselves. So we all hear sometimes that most coaches or athletes have heard the versions of this statement and often buy into the idea that predetermined repetitions and drills will lead to muscle memory that we will run automatically once activated. So examples include like a basketball player and its over reliance on shooting free throws and repeating the same movements in the same place over and over again to build muscle memory. So the truth here is that muscles don't have doesn't possess the ability to have memories. Memories come from our brain, specifically your procedural memory. So when we practice a physical activity or skill, such as playing an instrument or performing in a sport, our brain undergoes a learning process that involves creating and strengthening neural connections. These connections form neural pathways that allow for more efficient communication between the brain and the muscles that are involved in that particular task. And through this repetitive practice, the brain becomes more adept at coordinating and controlling the necessary movements or the necessary muscle movements, leading to improved performance. So, this process is often associated with increased speed, accuracy, and fluidity of movement. However, it is not the muscles themselves that remember the movements. Rather, it's the brain's ability to coordinate and execute the actions more effectively. And so, another learning myth is that sometimes you might hear that, oh, I'm left brained or I'm right brained. And I, do better tasks because I'm left brained, or I'm better at other things because I'm right brained. This myth suggests that people have dominant brain hemispheres, with the left side of the brain being associated with analytical thinking, logic, and language skills, while the right side of the brain is linked to creativity, intuition, and artistic abilities. The origins of this left brain, right brain myth can be traced all the way back to the 1960s. And they here in this research, they studied patients who had undergone a surgical procedure called split brain surgery, which involves severing the corpus callosum, so the bundle of nerve fibers connecting the brain's hemispheres, to treat severe epilepsy. But through their experiments, they found that each hemisphere of the brain appeared to have some specialized functions. And then herein lies the myth. And so let's take a look at what's actually true. While each side does have distinct functions, they have to work together. Some areas might be more activated during certain activities, but no side is more active than the other. Numerous scientific studies have debunked this left brain, right brain myth. Neuroimaging techniques using fMRI have shown that various cognitive processes involve the cooperation of both hemispheres or multiple brain regions, regardless of the location of the hemisphere. So, for example, language processing, often associated with the left hemisphere, relies on a network of brain areas distributed across both hemispheres. So, in summary, this left brain, right brain notion or myth oversimplifies the complexity of the brain function. And so, while certain functions may be more localized or specialized in the hemisphere, the brain operates through intricate networks and connections. And people don't have a dominant left side or a right side in terms of their personality or their cognitive abilities. So then let's also take a look at, dive into brain activity. There is a myth that you might have heard of, that at any given point, only 10% of our brain is being used. So the myth that humans only use 10% of our brain is a widespread misconception that has been debunked by scientific research time and time again. This myth has been perpetuated in popular culture and has become a popular belief despite lacking scientific basis. The myth may have originated from the misinterpretation of scientific findings. It is true that only a small percentage of neurons in the brain are firing at any given point, but this does not imply that the rest of the brain is just not operating or dormant or unused. Neurons have varying firing rates, and depending on the type of activity or the cognitive demand, and different regions of the brain are active at different times. So the truth here is that all parts of our brain are constantly active during the day and even while we sleep. In reality, modern neuroscience has shown that the entire brain is active and involved in various functions throughout the day. Different regions of the brains are responsible for different tasks and maybe more localized or specialized, but they work together in a complex network to enable our thoughts, emotions, and behavioral actions. So this has been found through sophisticated brain imaging techniques such as fMRI, and demonstrated that even during simple tasks, multiple areas of the brain are activated. Whether we are engaged in reading, talking, solving problems, or engaging in a mental or physical activity, our brains utilize a significant portion of its resources. So in conclusion here, the notion that we only use 10% of our brain is a myth, and that our brains are highly complex and constantly active, with the ability to perform a wide range of functions. Another myth that you might hear is that listening to classical music before a test can make you smarter, and that also babies who listen to Mozart while in the womb will grow up to be smarter. The Mozart effect is a popular belief that listening to classical music, particularly the works of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, can enhance cognitive abilities such as intelligence and spatial temporal reasoning. This is a myth, and it originated from a study that was published in 1993, where they suggested a temporary improvement in spatial temporal reasoning skills after listening to Mozart's music for a short period of time. This study is often referred to as the Mozart effect study, which involved having college students listen to either Mozart's music, relaxation instructions, or silence for 10 minutes. And afterwards, they were given tasks that involved spatial temporal reasoning, such as paper folding and cutting. The researchers reported that students who listened to Mozart performed slightly better on these tasks compared to other groups. However, the media really overpopularized and the public perception of this Mozart effect study far beyond the actual findings and the study results. The idea that simply listening to Mozart's music can permanently boost intelligence over cognitive abilities gained widespread attention, but was untrue, and it actually led to the sales of more classical music and the development of various products claiming to have the Mozart effect. So what the truth here is that listening to music is good for your mental health, and learning to play music can have huge benefits on your brain. However, subsequent research has failed to consistently replicate the specific finding of the original study. While it is true that music, including classical compositions, have positive effects on your mood, relaxation, and focus, this notion that listening to Mozart's music has direct benefits and impacts on long-term intelligence or cognitive function is not supported by scientific evidence. All right, so now let's look at some myths related to learning in the classroom. So we all might have heard that each person has their own unique learning style that helps them learn better. Learning styles are actually a myth that refers to the belief that individuals have distinct learning styles, like I am a visual learner, or I am an auditory or kinesthetic learner, and then tailoring instruction to match these styles improves learning outcomes. According to this myth, some people are visual learners who learn best by visually representing things on charts or diagrams, while others are auditory learners who like to listen to the audio or listen to podcasts only, while some are more kinesthetic, where they need to enact and be more hands-on. This concept of learning styles gained popularity in the 1970s and 1980s and has persisted despite the lack of scientific evidence supporting its validity. Many learning style models and assessments were developed because of this information or this myth, leading to the idea that teaching methods should be customized to suit individual learning styles. But the truth of the matter is that people use all of their senses to learn. When you're learning, when you're watching a video lecture, when you're engaging in hands-on activities, you're using your eyes, you're using your actions, you're using your senses. You're not just a visual learner, or you're not just an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner. You're using all three all at the same time, even if you don't know that you're doing it. There's no difference in outcome between those who are taught in a preferred style versus a non-preferred style. And self-reports are very often flawed. You might ask this question to people and they say, oh, I'm for sure a visual learner. I really need to see things. But if they're just seeing things and not necessarily reading, and they're not listening to the audio, that's not necessarily true. They might think that they are, but the truth of the matter, and these scientific findings have not been able to prove that people are just one type of learning style. So numerous studies and literature reviews have consistently shown that tailoring instruction to match learning styles does not significantly improve learning outcomes. The evidence suggests that it is more effective to use a variety of instructional strategies and provide diverse learning experiences that engage different senses and modalities. The main problem here is that with the learning style myth is that it oversimplifies the complex nature of human learning. In reality, learning is multifaceted process that involves various cognitive processes and is influenced by factors such as our prior knowledge, our motivation, attention, and our instructional context. So people might have preferences for how they learn, but these preferences do not necessarily translate into improved learning outcomes. So in conclusion, this learning style myth suggests that individuals have distinct learning styles, that instruction should be customized to those learning styles. However, there is no scientific evidence that supports this notion. Instead, we should be embracing instructional strategies that diversify and activate and to be tailored to different kinds of modalities that promote active learning that are more effective in facilitating instruction to individuals. Another interesting myth that we might have heard, especially people in college, is that taking stimulants or taking drugs enhances your learning and academic performance. So this learning myth is surrounding this idea, or this notion suggests that using drugs like amphetamines or prescription medications such as Adderall or Ritalin can enhance learning and academic performance. This is a myth. This myth is particularly prevalent among students who believe that taking stimulants will improve their focus, attention, and cognitive abilities, allowing them to study longer and retain information. While it might be true that stimulant medications are commonly prescribed to individuals with ADHD to help manage their symptoms, the belief that these drugs can universally benefit individuals without ADHD or that the cognitive enhancers for learning is not supported by scientific evidence. Stimulants work by increasing the level of certain neurotransmitters in the brain, such as dopamine or norepinephrine, which can improve attention and reduce impulsivity in individuals with ADHD. However, when these drugs are used by individuals without a legitimate medical need, they can have negative health consequences and potentially life-damaging risks. So the truth of the matter of this myth is that research on the effects of stimulants on learning and academic performance in individuals without ADHD has shown mixed results. So while studies have suggested modest improvements in certain cognitive tasks, such as working memory or attention, other studies have not found any significant benefits of taking stimulants for learning. Additionally, the long-term effects of potential harms of using stimulants that are not prescribed or using it in healthy individuals are not well understood. So taking stimulants without a prescription or taking drugs without a prescription or medical supervision can lead to various health effects, including increased heart rate, elevated blood pressure, insomnia, anxiety, irritability, and dependency. Misuse or abuse of stimulants can also have serious health consequences and legal ramifications. So, in conclusion, the belief that taking stimulant drugs can enhance learning or academic performance is a myth. And adopting healthy lifestyle habits and effective study strategies are way more effective to support your learning experience and your academic success. And then another one that I want to cover is like rereading and highlighting text. This one might be a little bit obvious, but The learning myth surrounding rereading and highlighting tests suggests that repeatedly reading and highlighting information is an effective study strategy that promotes learning and better retention. The myth here is based on the assumption that simply going over the same content multiple times and making and then marking important sections with the highlighter will enhance your understanding and memory. However, research here shows that learning and memory has consistently shown that relying solely on rereading and highlighting as study techniques is not as effective as you might think. While these activities may create a sense of familiarity with the material, they do not necessarily lead to deeper comprehension or long-term retention, or what we were just talking about with meaningful learning. So the truth here is that rereading can be passive and a superficial approach to studying. Similarly, highlighting can give the false sense of accomplishment and understanding. So merely going through the same text over and over again without actively engaging or relating to prior knowledge or making meaningful connections can limit the effectiveness of the learning process. The act of reading itself does not guarantee meaningful learning unless additional strategies are employed to promote active learning, active thinking, critical thinking, and processing of this information. And it's the same with highlighting because it gives a false accomplishment of understanding. You like recognize the text that's on that you highlighted. Maybe you highlight again, like, oh yeah, I remember that there, but you're not making those meaningful connections. You're not actively encoding and retrieving the material. So some other strategies that might be more helpful is spaced repetition. We talked about this, about having specific timed intervals that improve long-term retention and spacing it out. Doing some retrieval practice, so actively recalling, self-testing, using index cards, using practice exams to enhance your memory. Elaboration, that's this idea of connecting new information with your prior knowledge. Interleaving, so mixing up different topics and types of problems during a study session. One of the key things that I like to do is if you use index cards, you can shuffle all the index cards, put them in a new context, and then try to go through in a new order and try to go through those index cards again. And lastly, active learning, engaging in activities such as problem solving, active discussions with your peers, and applying the knowledge to help reinforce the understanding and retention. This last section of digital natives is also really interesting. We might hear that, oh, we are a new generation of people who think differently because we grew up with technology, or we were considered digital natives. This learning myth that digital natives refers to the belief that younger generations, particularly those who have grown up with digital technologies from a young age, possess inherent technology skills that are superior abilities to navigate and utilize digital tools and platforms compared to older generations. This myth suggests that young people are naturally adept with using technology for learning and that traditional educational approaches need to be adapted to cater their unique needs. While I am a big promoter and supporter of education technology and how we might use technology to improve student learning experiences, what this myth is saying, on the other hand, is that we just fundamentally learn completely different because we have technology. And that's an oversimplification. The concept of digital natives gained popularity with the rise of the internet and the proliferation of digital devices in the 1990s, all the way up to the early 2000s. And they argue that individuals born in this digital age had different learning styles. Again, we don't necessarily have particular learning styles. That's another myth. And preferences, and that educational institutions needed to adapt their teaching. However, research has challenged this notion of digital natives as a distinct generation with superior technological skills. While younger generations may indeed have more exposure to technology, it does not automatically translate into expertise or the innate or being born with this genetic ability to navigate complex digital environments. So the truth here is that digital natives have grown up learning how to use basic technology. They still need to direct instruction on 21st century literacy skills. So studies have shown that young people may be proficient in certain digital tools such as socializing, entertainment, and communications. I mean, kids these days are on TikTok all the time, on Instagram, maybe not on Facebook anymore, but they're using these kinds of social media platforms and they definitely know it well. But digital literacy is multifaceted, the skill that requires not only technical proficiency, but also critical thinking, information evaluation, and digital citizenship. So There is a considerable diversity among individuals within the same age group in terms of digital skills, experiences, and interests. However, factors such as socioeconomic backgrounds, their cultural context, access to technology, and educational opportunities play a significant role in shaping individuals' digital competencies. So, just because a person knows how to use TikTok doesn't make them a software engineer, right? Just because someone knows how to navigate and use an iPhone doesn't make them a computer engineer. There has to be some learning, there has to be some literacy, there has to be a learning process that has developed over time, right? So, in conclusion, the learning myth of digital natives overgeneralizes the technology skills and the abilities for younger generations, especially now that we're thinking about, oh, you know, we're living in the age of ChatGPT now, so everyone, everyone is just everyone is just digitally adept, right? But in order for you to successfully use ChatGPT, you need to have a fundamental understanding about the things that you're going to be prompting, the things that you're going to be querying with ChatGPT. And the information that it regurgitates out in like 3 seconds is not going to make sense to someone unless you have a specific background or the knowledge base around that. So we live in an interconnected world, and we recognize the diversity of digital skills, and it's crucial, and more crucial than maybe before, in understanding technology. But the truth of the matter is that that digital natives don't necessarily fundamentally think our brains are not rewired differently because we use technology. We still need to direct these instructions to teach 21st century literacy skills. And so the last learning myth that I want to cover is that human beings are really good at doing multiple things at once. This is a myth. And I know sometimes you're like, oh, I'm a great multitasker. I like to have 3 monitors open with multiple tabs and multiple windows so I can do many things at the same time, right? This is what the learning myth is trying to target. It's that the learning myth surrounding multitasking suggests that individuals can effectively and efficiently perform multiple tasks simultaneously. And it's this belief that dividing our attention and focusing on many different things, such as studying while listening to music or checking social media while we're working, one can accomplish more things in less amount of time with equal competence for each task. However, research has consistently shown that multitasking is in fact a myth. The human brain is not designed, and we're not wired to handle so many multiple tasks at the same time simultaneously with the same level of attention and focus. So when attempting to multitask, what actually happens is rapid task switching, or switching of attention between the different tasks, leading to decrease in overall productivity and performance. So the truth here is that we perform automatic actions at the same time. But for anything that requires conscious thought, we cannot multitask. Multitasking is more about task switching. So an example here is like, oh, you can walk and you can talk. Performing these automatic actions at the same time, yes. But let's say, oh, I'm going to watch this video lecture, and I'm going to watch Netflix, and I'm going to be on Amazon, and I'm going to be on TikTok all at the same time. That is actually more about task switching. And when we are doing all of those things simultaneously, our attention and our focus is actually impaired. So several studies have demonstrated that attempting to multitask can result in reduced efficiency, increased errors, and impaired learning. I think we've all experienced this, in one shape or form and another. One of the things that I used to do when I was an undergrad at UCI was study at Gateway. And oh my gosh, I'd have a great time studying at Gateway. Most of the time because I'm not actually doing any work at all. I'm like hanging out with a bunch of friends. I'm seeing people come in and out. We're talking about our day. We're like, discussing, oh, we need to study for this midterm, but none of us are actually studying because we're just having a good time hanging out. So then I actually, at some point during my second or third year, I switched over to the science library, and I hid away from everyone, and I focused on exactly taking the time to study, mark out 2 hours of my day to study a specific thing, and got into the library and got out. And, it takes a really big kind of shift in thinking in terms of how you are going to develop study habits, but multitasking is not one of them. So multitasking can negatively affect your memory consolidation. When attention is divided, information does not get encoded into the memory as effectively, leading to poorer retention and recall of learned material. Oftentimes, if you're multitasking and you're doing all of these different things at once, you're actually working harder to try and grasp the material that you're learning rather than just focusing on that one or two tasks that you need to get done. So instead of multitasking, research suggests that focusing on one task at a time, also known as single tasking or monotasking, leads to better learning outcomes and higher productivity. So by giving full attention to a specific task, individuals can allocate their cognitive resources more efficiently and effectively to engage in deeper processing, comprehension, and problem solving. So creating an environment that's conducive, that is focused, that focuses your attention, can enhance productivity and learning outcomes. In this case, my example of going to the science library or going to the Langston, hiding away somewhere where no one can find me, and where I'm able to focus on the things that I need to focus on. So that's it for learning myths for now, and I hope you learned a lot. Hopefully it, made you think about some of these myths that you might hear from time to time, and then also now know the truth and the fact of the matter that's backed by scientific research that are involved with how our brains function and different ways in which we can successfully increase information into our long-term memory.